Hello, my name is Charlotte Hoberg. I am one of the trainers here on the Collective Canine Training channel here on YouTube. We are a newly formed group of trainers who are going to hopefully give some helpful information to either up-and-coming trainers, already established trainers, and handlers and owners in general. I have been training professionally for 1 year, but I've owned dogs all my life. I also trained horses professionally for 8 years and have ridden them all my life. Now, I understand that dogs and horses are pretty different, but basic learning theory is still exactly the same. And I'll get into that in just a second. The dog that I own currently is a 2-year-old mixed breed rescue. His name is Pax. Here I'll show, there he is. He's about 75 pounds, pretty tall, pretty active. We do compete in rally obedience, which is the newer AKC sport out there. If you guys haven't heard of it, definitely look into it. We hope to pursue some competition obedience and maybe some nose work and some other stuff in the future. We did focus a lot on kind of basic obedience and behavior modification for the first year and a half of his life. He has some severe resource guarding tendencies that kind of took a little time to really get out of the way. He is flourishing now. He's really, really good. He had some pretty severe resource guarding issues and aggression issues that were pretty genetic. Day 1 at 12 weeks, he had a really aggressive reaction to people being around food and all that other stuff. So we've worked really hard to get him over that, and he is about 85% good. I mean, and by that I mean he does a lot of the choices on his own. There are still things that I have to make sure that I'm there and, either manage or cue him to do, and he's never left alone in a situation that would put him at risk of relapsing or having any issues. So that's been really helpful, and I'll talk about kind of more of that in a second. We're going to talk today about operant conditioning and the Humane Hierarchy. These are basic concepts for anyone who owns a dog, who trains their dog, who trains other dogs, whatever it could be. This is very basic information, but it's very important information. It's something that hasn't been, it's not news. Operant conditioning has been around since 1938, which talks about reinforcers and punishment and neutral things in the environment that really don't add or take away behavior. This is stuff that is applicable to dogs, horses, cats, people, any type of animal. The 4 quadrants of operant conditioning can be used in any sort of training. I will bring up the 4 quadrants. We have a few different things going on here. We have reinforcement, we have punishment, and then we have positive and negative. So I'll start with positive. A lot of people, when they hear the word positive, think good things, happy, go lucky, sunshine, all that stuff. Positive in the sense, or in the context of operant conditioning and training, just means adding something. So when you see positive, don't think happy smiley face, think an addition sign. Literally, you're just adding something. Negative is the opposite. You're taking away from something. So negative doesn't have to be mean and nasty or anything like that. So take away emotional attachment to these words. Positive literally means adding, and negative literally means minusing or subtracting. And then reinforcement is something that encourages a behavior to repeat itself, or a dog to repeat a certain behavior. Punishment discourages the repetition of a behavior. So positive reinforcement, this is an easy one. People have a pretty good idea of what positive reinforcement means. It is literally the adding of something that will encourage a behavior to continue to happen. So giving a treat for a dog sitting is positive reinforcement. You're reinforcing something, the behavior of sit, by giving a treat when the dog sits. Negative reinforcement is taking away something to reinforce a behavior. So and this is where it gets a little more tricky for people to understand. Basically, we're taking away something not to punish a behavior, but the idea is that when this aversive or unpleasant stimuli goes away, it is then reinforcing a certain behavior. So a good example of this: dog pulls on leash, feels pressure on neck, stops pulling, and when he stops pulling, pressure goes away. That's a very basic example. The idea is when they do the right thing, bad thing goes away. Now, positive punishment. This is the adding of something to discourage a behavior. So dog jumps up, you yell at them, they stop jumping. Dog jumps up, or dog, I don't know, runs after squirrel, they get a shock, so they stop running after the squirrel. It does not have to be something physically aversive, but usually it is an aversive stimuli that interrupts or stops a certain behavior, whether it's verbal, a noise like compressed air, or pennies in a jar, or a physical, like a jabbing at the dog, a pop of the leash, or a stimuli on the e-collar. Negative punishment is the taking away of something to punish the dog, or to discourage a behavior. So you want the dog to sit when you go to feed them, you get the bowl filled, you go to feed them, dog gets up and gets it crazy, you remove the bowl. So the thing that they want goes away until they do a better behavior. Now, in order for these to work, we also have to understand the Humane Hierarchy. These are the order in which you need to kind of go through things to make sure your dog is behaviorally sound. So first, you need to make sure your dog is nutritionally cared for, so that your food is high quality, nutritious. Maybe the dog likes it, hopefully, but they're not having any GI issues, they're not having any allergies, they're not lacking nutrition, whatever it could be, they're nutritionally met, or nutrition needs are met. And then their physical needs are met, so your dog is not stir crazy, it's in a kennel all day long, maybe you don't take it on walks, whatever it could be, you need to make sure that their physical needs are met as well, which would be different for a Chihuahua versus a German Shepherd. But whatever type of dog you have and whatever activity level they have, you need to make sure their physical needs are met, they're not overweight or too skinny, whatever it could be. Antecedent arrangements, you need to make sure that however you're setting the dog up is not going to predictably and reliably set them up for failure. So if I have a dog that runs out into the street and I want to stop that, I'm not going to continue to let him out in an unfenced area. Maybe I'll keep him on a long line or on a leash to prevent a certain behavior from happening. So this is something that you do to reliably predict that the dog will act a certain way. So dog rushes at people and barks and jumps when strangers come to the house. Maybe don't let him loose in the house, put him in another room, or have someone hold on to him, or something in the meantime while he's learning a better behavior. Now, in these arrangements where you have management in play, whether it be a fenced-in yard, a leash, whatever it could be, an X-pen, it prevents the dog from doing certain bad behaviors, chasing after a squirrel, running into the neighbor's yard and digging, whatever it could be. That way, you can prevent certain bad behaviors from happening, but they can also make better decisions. So maybe I want to teach my dog to have good recall on hikes, so I'll start with a long line. And anytime he gives me a check-in, I can positively reinforce that behavior. Meaning if he looks at me or he comes and approaches me. So I would add something that would reinforce that behavior. So maybe when he looks at me or he comes over to, see what I'm doing, I might give him a treat or a toy or a pet or whatever it could be that is rewarding to that dog. Now, positive reinforcement alone, meaning capturing or waiting for a good thing to happen and doing nothing else, will not stop bad behaviors from happening. So you also have to add in a different behavior to replace an old behavior or to prevent a new behavior from happening. So a good example here is the dog jumps up when he sees people. A behavior you can add in that is incompatible with jumping is usually a sit or down. Usually people do a sit because it's easier to greet the dog, whatever you want. But that way you can teach them a behavior that they can then do in that circumstance. So sitting is a good example. You see a person, you cue them for a sit, you reinforce that behavior. They're also on a leash, so they can't go out and be reinforced by charging at a person. And they learn that sitting gets reinforced. Either they get to greet the person, or you give them a treat or whatever it could be. Pulling on the leash, you teach them to do loose leash walking or heel. So you give them a better behavior that is incompatible with the behavior that you are looking to diminish. Next we have extinction, negative reinforcement, and negative punishment. So let's say I want the dog to sit when he wants attention and look at me. But he knows that there is a history of barking and humans looking at him. So for the most part, when we can catch him and ask him for a sit, and this is in the learning process, he might sit, but then every once in a while he still tries to bark. In the moments or in the first times that you stop reinforcing the bark, so you ignore him, meaning negative punishment, you're withholding a reward, the attention, until he does a positive or a better, a better incompatible behavior, the sit. Dog gets frustrated because he knows that barking has worked in the past, and in his mind, if I just keep trying harder, it may work. This is extinction. A good analogy to think of is if you go to a vending machine and you put money in, and every single day you get a Coke out. One day you come up and no Coke comes out, and you get frustrated. You might get angry. You might start hitting the machine. You might start shaking the machine. You might start yelling at it and kicking it. You do a lot of behaviors to try to get what you want, your reinforcement, until you finally give up. And it's the same with the dog, except that we can't rationalize with the dog. We can't tell them, I just want you to know that the barking is no longer being reinforced. So it's not going to take a couple of times. It might take over a period of time, and it may get better for a while and then get worse again and get better again. So it's about consistency, making sure you're asking and cueing for that alternative behavior, not reinforcing the bad behavior. You're reinforcing consistently the good stuff, and then you're also managing the dog so that they don't not put in situations where they may revert to the bad behavior again, until they've learned thoroughly that the new or alternative behavior. So if you go through those processes and things are still not working out, then you may explore positive punishment. Let me make this clear that positive punishment is not only physical aversive stimuli. A lot of people think about e-collars and prong collars and choke chains and whatever, hitting the dog, whatever it could be. Those are examples of positive punishment, that is for sure, but you know, it can be as simple as telling the dog no, or a shush noise, or compressed air, or pennies in a jar. Whatever it could be, it's the adding of something to diminish a behavior. We want to leave that for like the absolute last ditch option, because we need to make sure we give the dog as much opportunity to learn a better behavior. All right, when we are using an alternative behavior, we are giving the dog information on what is appropriate in that moment. So if the dog is frustrated and wants to greet, instead of saying no when he jumps, or getting mad or angry, or even just an interrupter, when we tell them to sit, or even if they've learned leave it and we tell them leave it, or if we ask for eye contact, all of those things give the dog information in that moment on what they could be doing better. Now, dogs are not malicious. They're not going to be going out of their way to try to do something to annoy people. However, they do work on what is rewarding in this moment and what is not rewarding in this moment. And if jumping has been rewarding, even if it's not something that we've rewarded ourselves, so like the dog is pulled and a stranger has pet them on the head as they walk by, or they pulled and they got forward, even a step, they're going to continue to try those things if we don't manage their behavior and give them alternative behaviors that are far more rewarding, more reliably. So when we give them the alternative behavior, sitting, eye contact, leave it, down, stay, whatever it is, you're giving them information in that moment, what they could be doing to get reinforced. When you add a positive punishment, and it's not that I'm saying they're never necessary or never useful, but when you give a positive punishment, all it does is stop the behavior they're doing in that moment. So if you are looking to get a different behavior, or, you know, whatever's going on in that moment, think about what you could be asking them instead. So they're jumping, or they're whining, or they're fixated on a squirrel. Instead of telling them no, you could say leave it, or you could ask for eye contact, or you can ask them to heel, or you could ask, you know, a number of things in that moment that would actually give them information of what you want them to do rather than what you don't want them to do. So one of the things that I want to kind of work towards is, rather than people focusing on what I don't like what the dog is doing, or I want them to stop that, or whatever, and visualize what they could be doing so you can reinforce that behavior, manage it so they don't get reinforced when they do the bad behavior, and really keep in mind the humane hierarchy so that you are in line with up-to-date training methods. You are giving your dog an opportunity to learn something, and you're being clear and fair as a trainer or owner or handler, or whatever you may be. I hope to get into more in depth with some specific behaviors and problems, and I hope some of the trainers that are on board with me will be excited to get in depth with a variety of different problem behaviors, as well as some fun things to teach your dog in different situations. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys like this video, you can give a thumbs up, subscribe, comment. You can message me and tell me maybe what you agreed with or you didn't agree with, maybe something you didn't understand, whatever it could be. I'm going to try to do a video at least once weekly, and the other people are going to have different days they post things, so hopefully we'll be posting pretty often. If you have any questions, you can comment, and if you have any recommendations of a next video, feel free to give it to us. Alright, have a good week.